Creamer Media's Mining Weekly is interviewing Professor Judith Kinnaird, the visiting professor of the School of Geosciences and the co-director of Cimera at the University of the Witwatersrand. Can we kick off around the low-carbon economy? We hear a lot these days about critical metals for a low-carbon economy. But what is meant by critical metals?
Critical metals are simply those metals that are critical to the economy of any particular country. So if you're making something like cars, the metals that are critical to your economy might be different from another country whose main output is computers. But what makes a metal critical? There are several factors. One, the actual availability of supply. For instance, 90% of all platinum group elements come from South Africa, which produces just over 70%, Russia at 12%, and Zimbabwe at 7%. So 90% of our platinum group elements come from 3 countries. The other thing that makes something critical is the political stability of the country. And then the other factor that makes something critical is if it's mined as a minor commodity of something like zinc, for instance, if we wanted gallium. If we stop mining zinc, where's that gallium going to come from? And other factors such as the grade of the metal and the difficulty of processing all lead towards criticality. But, you know, things have been critical right from early man, when we went through the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the coal and steam industrial age, and the now recently the petroleum age.
And what, in your view, can Africa contribute to what is needed when it comes to critical metals?
Africa can produce quite a lot for the global needs. Africa can contribute things like platinum group metals from the Bushveld complex. But for batteries, we can produce lithium from Zimbabwe, from Namibia, and going into the future, we'll be producing from DRC and Mali. Obviously, cobalt is a very important material, and 70% of the world's supply comes from DRC. But here we have the perception that there's child labor involved, and that obviously causes issues. Then for things like vanadium, we produce that from the Bushveld complex, from the rocks above where the PGEs are. We can produce nickel and graphite, so we can make a major contribution to the economy going into the future for a low-carbon society.
It seems that lithium and rare earths are highly critical. Why is this?
Okay, well, lithium's been mined for a long time, and it's used in oven-to-tableware, lithium ceramics. But what makes it very important and critical at the moment is that it's used in lithium-ion batteries for car energy. And lithium is produced in a limited number of countries. And there are worries that if we go into the future, that our supplies of lithium might run out. Also, lithium is only processed in a couple of countries. And so we're reliant on a supply chain and the supply, really. And rare earths is even more particular because 90% of the world's rare earths come from China. Now, there are 15 rare earth elements, and each has a different particular use. For example, one of the rare earths called europium, we use in our televisions to make the color red. But the 15 rare earth elements can be divided into 2 groups, light rare earths and heavy rare earths. And the light rare earths are abundant, but it's the heavy rare earths that are much less common, but are those that are really needed for critical technology metals. And these rare earths are used in wind turbines, in magnets, in computers, in a complete range of technological things. So they're incredibly important, but we worry about the world's supply of them.
And if the world moves as it is towards battery electric vehicles, does this mean that platinum and palladium, where we have great strength, will no longer be needed for catalytic converters in cars?
Well, yes, that is the case. Obviously, something like 70% of our platinum, palladium, rhodium go into catalytic converters at the moment. And certainly if we all went electric, that would reduce the requirement for these platinum group elements considerably. However, we also need platinum group elements in glass making, as engineering catalysts for cracking long chain hydrocarbons, and even for drugs for cancer. But going forward, I don't think we will go to complete electric car economy because of the fact that, well, let's face it, in South Africa, we haven't even got enough electricity at the moment to keep the industry and the home lights burning. So I don't think that we're going to have a complete economy of lithium. We will, I think, move towards hydrogen-powered vehicles, where you use hydrogen produced from the atmosphere, and then it will burn with oxygen, and you'll just produce water. So at the end of that, you will have a need for the platinum group elements more so than they're in cars at the moment.
And what are the implications for the mining industry of all these moves towards a non-carbon economy and the big modifications and changes and disruptions?
Oh, this is going to be huge. A World Bank report in 2020 states that, well, first of all, that mining for the new low carbon economy requires much, much more materials. There'll be much more mining needed to meet the needs for this low carbon economy. But there's a number of things that are going to be important as well. Things like vertical integration. So companies are going to have to take much more control and interest in the whole value chain from mine to market, through the mining, the concentrating, the processing, the refining, the production of the metal, and the use of that metal. And there are some new companies like Cobalt, set up by Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Mike Bloomberg, and they're taking that vertical chain very seriously. And it means that mines will need to be much more mindful of environmental, social governance things for the future. And many companies will be finding out where their sources are to be able to assure their customers that they're not using cobalt from child labor, or they're not using various other things that have been produced in a rather dodgy fashion. So there's going to be more mine to market logic. And in the case of Robert Friedland of Ivanhoe, he has said recently that we will be more aware of where our material comes from, and people will be prepared to pay for commodities that have been ethically sourced. So I think that's a quite important feature. And mines are going to have to mine more responsibly, not necessarily producing less waste. That's not necessarily possible. But for instance, they could maybe create small industries that use some of their waste maybe to make concrete bricks or whatever. And also in many tailings, there are traces of other metals, and maybe we should be trying to get those out rather than leaving them on the tailings piles.
And have we got enough metals for a sustainable future?
That's a difficult question. The simple, flippant answer is yes, because they're all in seawater, but we can't afford the costs of producing them from seawater. So Gro Harlem Brundtland said that sustainable development is meeting our needs without compromising the needs of the society of the future. And so one of the things that we have to do is to create more of a circular economy. We have mining, we have processing, and then after that, when we've produced our material, we go round the circle, that goes into a design, it goes into a car or a computer. And at the end of the life, we're throwing a lot of things away. For instance, how many cell phones have you had recycled? We just tend to throw them away. And yet there are traces of half the periodic table in our cell phones, but those things are too small at our current processing costs and abilities to extract the metals back out of them. Certainly, we will be able to extract the PGE from catalytic converters as we do now, but in terms of lithium, there are very few places around the world that are capable of reprocessing lithium. So at the moment, when lithium is used, it's used and it's not going back into in the circle. So we are making a gap in the circle when we throw things away. So we have to recycle much more. And David Attenborough says that he hopes that we're going to become the generation of sustainability where we do close the gap. And I would like to see, for instance, if you buy a fridge or whatever at the moment, it gives you an A to F rating as to how much electricity that fridge uses. I would like to see a similar rating for the recyclability, A for good and F for fail sort of thing. But it does mean that we're going to have to completely rethink our design of equipment, of products, so that we make them more recyclable. So it's up to us really to complete the circular economy and make sure that there is enough material for a sustainable future.
And finally, just give us a snapshot of what Cimera is all about.
We're a Centre for Excellence for the integration of minerals and energy research analysis. And so we're a consortium across 12 universities. It's jointly run by myself at WITS, but the major centre is run by my colleague, Professor Nikki Wagner, out of UJ. And we support something like 70 research projects across the universities each year, looking at things like how to find more of certain commodities, what the structural and geological controls are, through trying to understand where the metals came from, how to understand better the geometallurgy of how to get the metals out of commodities. So we cover research really on the whole value chain in terms of extraction and mining. We don't do the mine to market. We stop at the sort of the processing side of things. And we give students the opportunity to do an MSc, a PhD, or a postdoc. And we're upskilling the population of geologists who will meet the needs of the future, particularly understanding the fourth industrial revolution and the handling of big data. So that's what we do.
That was Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, speaking to Professor Judith Kinnaird, the visiting professor of the School of Geosciences and the co-director of Cimera at the University of the Witwatersrand.